Perfect.
All right. So, anyways, this is your host, Michael J. Long. And as you know, the name of the show is Michael's Libertarian Pizza Party. So I always start the show by saying this is your host, Michael J. Long, host of Michael's Libertarian Pizza Party. And this is the part where I say, and we got a special guest today. But anyways, so Larry, Larry.
I'm the special guest, aren't I, Michael? It's me.
Yes, you are. And so if I'm not mistaken, you had decided that you announced, I think it was a few weeks ago, that you have explored an exploratory committee for running to explore the prospects of running for governor in this state. So,
That is an accurate statement, Michael. You are correct. I have decided to start looking into this with more and more detail and gusto. Making a run like this is a big deal. It sucks up time and money and energy. And sadly, most of the people who will be running against me, if anybody, they're all going to be getting government checks, right? So the odds are, if the Republican is running, it'll be one of the people who's already, an active congressperson or an active politician. The Democrat will be an active politician, actively working. So they're all getting paid to run. I'm just a private citizen. So when I run as a full-time job, I don't get paid. I just lose money when I do it. So I don't want to do it if I can't make some impact. I'm not against losing the money. I did it last time, but I am against doing it and not making real impact. That's what I want. I want to be able to say it was worth the time, money, and energy.
all right. And so, yeah, because a lot of people say, a lot of people will estimate that as, he's going to run for governor. Now, I don't want to say that you're going to run or not going to run until you make that announcement, at which point then we can go and say, okay, now he's definitely in the race. But there's also a petitioning process for that. And,
That's true.
And so, that's going to take up a lot of time and energy. But I think, where you're coming from, if I can understand you correctly, you believe that there's a potential for impact if you.
Yeah, and what I'm saying, I want to touch this piece, Michael. I'm actually, a lot of people are very worried about the petitioning side of it. I'm not. I mean, that's the part I'm not worried about. And why would I say that? Because libertarians are good at that. I mean, we've been very bad at winning elections recently. But when it comes to getting on the ballot, we're pretty good at it. We're good at doing it. We know how the rules work. We get out there and we hustle, and we tend to get people on the ballot. So the petitioning side is the side that I'm not worried about. It's everything else I'm worried about.
Right. It's being able to make sure that once you're actually on the ballot, that you're able to garner enough support to have impact at the very least.
That's correct. Yes, that's exactly right, Michael. Yes, that's what I'm trying to do, right? The reality of it is, can I run and, get 3 to 5% in a run? Yeah, no, literally no problem. I basically did that last time. Could I do it? Sure. And I'm more popular than I was last time because I ran last time. I have a better team because we've learned, right? So of course I could do that. But the question is, am I going to be able to make enough impact to where I break a hole in this system so big that they can't just cover it right up again? That's what they did last time, Michael. You remember that. You were there. They covered that hole right back up. I don't want them to do it again.
Right. Well, I think they covered it up because they ignored you in the press
Yep.
after you lost, and they made it seem like, it was just Governor Andrew Cuomo over here and
Yep.
Molinaro over there, and they were the main two guys. But they do that in every election cycle where
That's correct.
But I think, as you alluded to when we last spoke, they said that they have a lot more money. You just alluded to it, that they're getting a paycheck and this and that. So of
Yep.
course it's easy. It was easy for them the last time to cover that hole up with the amount of money they had and the amount of press coverage they had.
Well, there's another piece too, right? You're right. And I have to add on top of what you just said, on top of what you just said, when you don't do as well as I wish I had done, it's very easy for the public to try to forget about you. So they basically said, Larry's a flash in the pan. That's it. And now he's done. And what I'm trying to show them is, no, I'm still here. I wasn't a flash in the pan. I'm still here. And you can't get rid of me so fast. So why don't we instead listen to what I have to say, and maybe we'll have some impact. I'm trying to get people to realize that you can't just ignore me, that what I'm saying matters and people care.
And so, of course, there are various different issues that occur in New York State that will have to be addressed. And so one of them is tax reform. And
yes. Oh, my God, yes.
So what plans do you have for tax reform, and what can be done in a libertarian manner to address that, where it's sellable to the public at large?
This is a great question, and tax reform is so broad. I could spend the next 75 years talking about tax reform. It's so broad. But let me try to give one idea that I think is very interesting that a lot of people would enjoy. And it's a little bit generic, but I think you'll understand. And that is the idea that every year, right, we write a check to the state government for our taxes. So what if instead of sending that check directly off to the state government, you as an individual taxpayer had the option, if you wanted to take $500, and instead of giving it to the government, you give it to any nonprofit in New York State. Well, not just that. If that nonprofit is in your county, it doesn't go to $250, it goes to $500. So you could take $250 and give it to any nonprofit in New York State, or $500 and give it to a nonprofit in your state. What does that mean? It means it's optional, right? If you happen to like what your state government's doing, good for you. I don't know why you'd like it, but if you do, fine. I'm not going to argue with you. You have a right to believe that. And if you want to believe that, awesome. Write your check, give it to the state government. Life is good. But if you're saying, wait a minute, you know what? Maybe locally there is a nonprofit that could pick up the slack of something that I think my government isn't doing well. Whatever that thing is, whether you think that's childcare, whether you think that's fixing the roads, whatever you think that might be that you feel your government isn't doing well enough, you could, if you want to, write a check to them instead. What does that do? It encourages community to take charge of itself, which we don't do very well. Not just that, as the money starts going to these nonprofits, hopefully they'll do better. If they don't do better, then we won't keep funding them. I know, sounds crazy, but if they do better, then government will have two options. It will either get better on its own. That's wonderful. I hope there's better services for people. Or it'll go away because enough of the local community will step up that it can still serve its community without needing government. Either way it works, people still get serviced. It's voluntary, so if you're not into it, don't do it. But it allows an opportunity for the local charities to step up.
Right. Yeah, because part of the issue with the local charities is they're not incentivized to set up, because the state taxes people, and then it's like you don't have a choice, you have to pay taxes, and then you pay taxes, and it goes on to whatever government wants to do with it. You know, this we've seen at the federal level, we've seen this at the state level, and so if I can recap what you had just stated, basically what you would do is allow the private charities and the private donors and whatnot to step up. So the reform the tax code in that sense, I think, would get a lot of people on board, as it has last time. And of course, as you know, that's not the only issue, but that's one of the biggest issues, because that's one of the biggest issues as to why we have so many people leaving the state even though it's such a cozy and beautiful state in terms of its environment and scenery, but the political
I would agree. Yes.
seems to be awkward. And
Well, let me add a piece to that again. I mean, you're on the money. I just want to keep adding because sadly there's too much. We got to keep adding. So let me add a bit if I could. Not only does this give the opportunity for a local nonprofit or private charity to do well, it also takes away the disadvantage that some other nonprofits have, because so many nonprofits, they simply write grants to the government and try to get government money. Once you start getting government money as a nonprofit, you're actually not a nonprofit. You're just a government agency that's non-unionized, right? And if you care about unions, why would you want that to happen? You're basically a non-unionized government agency because you're being funded by the government, you're being judged by the government, and all the strings attached are all government strings. And when that happens, the money comes in from the government. How can a regular nonprofit compete when the government, basically free money, is competing against them? Really hard.
Right. Well, because the other thing too, and I'll give you an example of that. Here in Fulton County, New York, we have an agency called Lexington.
Called what? I'm sorry, can you say it again?
Lexington.
Lexington, thank you.
It's part of the Fulton County ARC. It's a chapter.
Yes, sure.
Yeah. So they provide services for people with disabilities, such as housing, like group homes, supportive apartments, and whatnot. But one of the biggest issues I feel is, first of all, they're being funded by the government because they're filling out grant applications and getting all this money from the state government. And
yes,
on the back side of that, regardless of what your income is as a disabled person, if you're living under Lexington, they're still going to go after your income.
Oh.
Whether that be Social Security or whether that be you got a job and you're working. And
is that true? I didn't even know that. Really?
Yeah, that's what they do. Like when they charge my rent, right?
Yeah.
It's about, I think, 600. The landlord gets about, I think, 50 or 60% of that rent money, and the rest goes on to the supports and all that, for the housing.
Oh, I see.
And whatnot, and some of the programs they have, right? But then they're also collecting money from the state but then they have, and on the other hand, they have all these regulations. So and it's so hard for other nonprofits that don't want to get the government involved and just do it themselves to compete.
Yeah, they're at a disadvantage. Yeah, it's funny. They're making it so that the private sector is now competing with the federal government or the state government.
Right, but not only that, there's a lot of these agencies that don't exist because of the environment that it has created.
What do you mean by that? Can you help me out to understand that one? What do you mean don't exist because of the environment?
Like with regards to Lexington or Vanderheiden and Rensselaer County or whatnot, the environment is not there where you can create an agency for people with disabilities that isn't going to, lump up to the government because
oh, that's what you mean. Okay, so I got it now.
That increases monopolized control over it too.
Got it. Now, okay, thank you. Now I get it.
And then that in turn breeds corruption. And I've observed a lot of that, but I think we've seen it in so many different areas. And it's not even funny. And the amount of regulations that are then imposed on monopolized government, non-unionized industries, as we call them, basically increases the control that they have, but it also over-regulates the marketplace of it. So,
yes.
You know what I mean? And
yeah. So it makes it so that the people who are already established with government relations, connections, and who know how the system works, they're able to thrive, while the newcomer trying new ideas to support the community, that person struggles and maybe can't even get anything done.
Or yet alone, that person may say, you know what? If Lexington exists, then why should I create an entity that doesn't compete against government, or that doesn't take from the taxpayers to compete? Or like, why should we donate to Lexington or such and such organization if they're already getting funding from the state?
Oh, you just brought up a very valid point, right? If you're getting funding from the state, does that actually create a disincentive for people to actually give to you? You might go, why would I give to these people? The state's already giving them money. I'm not going to give. So now there's no incentive for the community, or in theory, the community agency or community group to actually support the community, because the customer now isn't the community. The customer now is actually the government.
Right. And so
that's a problem. I agree.
It is. And that extends not only with, the people with disabilities and the lack of services that we get thereof, but it also extends to like mental health, drug rehabilitation, and so forth.
Well, I think what you're saying, it could actually work with virtually any community help group, right? It wouldn't matter what it is. I mean, it could be people with disabilities, but you're right. It could be homeless people. It could be, moms who, are single moms with 2 kids. It could be anything, right?
Right. And it could also.
Yeah, I think you're right. I agree with you.
And that also extends to the colleges. And of course, the other question I wanted to ask you was police reform, because that's also
okay.
a big topic. Just to change gears for a little bit, that's also
okay.
a big topic in many communities in the state and throughout the country, is police reform. Now, I'm a big fan of your show, and of course, you brought this up before about your ideas of police reform. But for my audience, for the audience here at large, could you reiterate your policies on police reform, how that would work at least at the state level, since it's exploring running for governor and all that?
So, yeah, the idea of police reform, the problem is that we've politicized police so much that as a general rule, you really have 2 sides. You have one side of people just yelling, defund the police, and another side yelling, back the blue no matter who. Neither of those 2 are right? Cops aren't bad and cops aren't good. Cops are just human beings. That's it. They're people, right? Some are good, some are bad, like any place else. They're just human beings trying to do a job and get the job done right to the best of their ability. I get that. I'm not mad at them for that. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And that's what you should expect them to do. They're humans trying to get a job done. So you don't want to be so harsh on the individual. You want to be harsher on the system so that you have a better system that protects good cops and gets rid of bad cops. The problem that we find in many cases is you find that when there's a bad cop, that bad cop doesn't get fired, doesn't get removed. If you look at many of the examples of police brutality or police problems, very often it's the same cop who's been disciplined multiple times, but simply has never been removed. Why does it happen? Well, there are many reasons, but one of the reasons why it happens is, okay, bad cop does a bad thing in County A. He then leaves County A. Why? Because they don't want to fire him. They don't want to have the problem with the union. They don't want to get sued. So they just let the cop quit and walk away. So the cop quits, walks away, and gets a job in another state or another county, whatever the case may be. Well, now where's the public here? The public hears, oh my God, another cop doing bad stuff. It's the same cop. He individually is a bad cop. Doesn't mean all the cops are bad. It means that cop is bad. And we have a system to where that bad cop is not being disciplined. So what I'm saying is, instead of just trying to fight that, don't. Instead, allow cops to carry their own liability insurance. I do it as a business person. I carry liability insurance. Most professionals do. Doctors do. Lawyers do. They all carry different types of insurance in case they make a mistake or do something wrong. Once a cop starts carrying his own insurance, here's what happens. If a cop just makes a mistake, and cops are humans, they will sometimes make mistakes, they may pay a little bit more in their insurance for a bit, and then they're back in action. That's it. Like anybody else who would, make an error or whatever the case may be, in your car insurance or something. You make an error, you pay a little bit more in car insurance for a year or two, and you're back in action. But what if this cop is a bad cop? Meaning they don't care about the rules, they do bad things, they hurt people. Well, that person's going to have their insurance shoot up a whole lot. And as their insurance shoots up a whole lot, it's going to become a whole lot more expensive for that person to be a cop. And eventually they're going to be uninsurable. And when they're uninsurable, they can't be a cop. I don't have to worry about a union stepping in. I don't have to worry about the police force stepping in, nothing. The insurance company says, this cop is a bad cop. They don't get to be a cop anymore. What does that do? It punishes the bad cop and lets the good cops be protected. Now, good cops don't have to worry about breaking the blue line, which I understand why they don't want to. This system allows them to not have to break the blue line and just let the insurance companies deal with the issues. It's that simple. But I'll go one step further. Right now, if cops screw up, who pays for that? You and I do, Michael. Taxpayers pay for that, right? The city pays for it. The state pays for it. Whatever, pays for it. I have an idea. Let the insurance company pay for it. That will change everything. Because right now, it's in the best interest of the city or the state or whatever, the municipality, to lie, to ensure that whatever happens doesn't make the state look bad because they have to pay for it. But imagine if all they had to do was just give the information to the insurance company. It would be in their best interest to just be honest. So now the government has no incentive to lie. The incentive is only to be truthful. The incentive of the insurance company is only to be truthful. And now we can protect good cops and only punish the bad ones.
And I think you added too, when you last spoke about it, of the 4 or the 5-point plan in terms of how to implement this.
Yes, I didn't know if you wanted me to go any further, but I'm happy to go further. The actual plan itself is called QUICK, QICC. I only talked about I, which was the insurance part. The second part, the first part's Q, and that is removing qualified immunity. But not just for cops. Qualified immunity for all of the judges and all of the people who just by default can't be sued by doing bad things. Many of them do bad things. And I want to get rid of the bad ones and allow the good ones to keep working and doing their job. So end qualified immunity also. That's the Q. I is the insurance part. The C is ending, taking cannabis off of Schedule 1. If you take cannabis off of Schedule 1 at the federal level, then there's no need for these low-level, stops. I don't have to stop people, for cannabis stops. I don't have to do that anymore. And it lets the cop focus on things that matter, like getting real bad guys. The guy who's got a bag of weed in his pocket is probably not a bad guy, right? So cops should be doing what I think most cops want to do, right? If you ask most cops, they will tell you they don't want to be busting kids for weed. They want to be going out and getting bad guys, murderers, rapists. They want to be getting those guys, which I want them getting that too. Please do your job, police officer. That'd be awesome. Please go do that. I would like cops to do that. That's what they should be focused on. And again, I think if you ask most cops, they'd agree with me. They'd say, yeah, that's what I joined the force to do, to get bad guys. So please go get them. I love that. And the second thing is not just to end qualified immunity, but to end civil asset forfeiture. Once you end civil asset forfeiture, now there's no financial incentive for cops to go doing things that they shouldn't be doing or that aren't getting real bad guys. And you end that by simply doing something by saying, hey, you know what? Every municipality or every, any city or state can only receive X amount of dollars per year from all fines and fees and forfeitures. So if you can only get a certain amount of money from doing it, after that, there's no incentive to do it anymore. So cops will only do it for the most important reasons, which is when they think there's a problem or for safety, which again, that's what I want cops doing. If we do that, everything is better.
Right. And I wish I could go further into this because you also stated how you would break down the police departments and allow the local communities to do very much the same thing. And I'm happy to go down that road. I'm sorry, I didn't want to steal all the time from your show, Michael, but I'm happy to do it if you want me to. Right. We still got a few minutes left. So.
Okay, I'll do it. The other piece is breaking down the police force into 4 separate units. Now, this doesn't always work in rural police forces. This works well in city police forces. And that's okay, because most people who are struggling with their police force are people who are in more urban communities. Most people who are in rural communities are actually pretty happy with their police forces. That's not 100% rule, but most are. So if you want someone to make changes in a rural police force, as a general rule, you want to create more civilian administrative support. A lot of times you find cops who are stuck in rural areas who are just doing too much paperwork and checking too many boxes. And again, I want that cop out catching bad guys, not doing paperwork. I would rather have civilians doing a whole lot more of their paperwork, being trained effectively to support them, preferably with community support, meaning local people understanding local issues. That's a simplified way of dealing with rural or sometimes even suburban police forces. When it comes to urbanized police forces, you want to break them down into several different places. I call it the FACS program. That's FAQS, FACS. F is family law. You have a certain group of your police force that is out there just dealing with family law issues, arguing spouses, dealing with kids, stuff like that. That group has a civilian component, and a civilian component is literally local chaplains. Chaplains whose job is to actually deal with these domestic issues, talk people down, those types of things. What I don't want is a cop who's out there doing active policing, just comes back from something very aggressive, and then now has to deal with, a husband and wife yelling at each other. That cop is just human. Again, they walk into that world, probably somebody's getting arrested, and maybe people don't need to be arrested. But if you've got a chaplain there to kind of calm things down and have a conversation, well, now if someone doesn't have to be arrested, they're not, right? The chaplain can calm the person down and see if this really merits an arrest or not. Now, the cop is there though. So sometimes these domestic issues are serious issues and people are going to be hurt. And sometimes the cop's got to be there to put somebody on the ground. I got it. The cop is there. But the first responder with that cop is a chaplain to see if it can be de-escalated. And that's why you start family law is a chaplain civilian component along with a cop. In addition, you are literally, equipped differently. You don't have to have heavy weapons if you're in family law, right? You do want to have a weapon, of course, but you don't need to have heavy weapons in family law. And you have a chaplain. The next one after that was the F. The next one's A, and that is active policing. That's the getting the bad guys. Yep, you got more heavy weapons there. That's in the streets. That's doing a tough, hard police work. That is getting bad guys. And that civilian component is going to be a community watch. A community watch that can be able to tell the cops when they're going to do a raid, no, that's not bad, Johnny's house. This is bad Johnny's house. Leaving the opportunity for mistakes to be made to all of a sudden go down a whole lot more. Also allowing the opportunity for some communities, depending upon the trust level they create within that community, to actually surrender people without the cops having to come into the community. That could happen also. That does happen in some communities. So that's the active policing side. But the issue with active policing is each urban area should decide on its own what the right answer is here. How long should a cop be allowed, literally, to stay in an active duty position? What do I mean by that? You don't let Marines stay in a combat zone 24/7 or for 3-4 years. They're in a combat zone, usually no more than 15 months, usually less than that, but no more than 15 months. And they rotate out and they rotate to a more peaceful area, into garrison. They get out of that area. They don't stay there. Why do we let our cops stay in the equivalent of a combat zone for 30, 40 years? Doesn't make any sense, right? So you decide within your own community what that time period is, depending upon how violent or how tough your community is. You go, all cops got to be in active policing for whatever, 3 years, as an example. Then you got to rotate out for a year and you got to go do something else. You got to go do family law or quality of life or social work or whatever. You just got to get out there and check something else out. This is not a bad idea. Marines do it. Cops should do it too. And maybe some guy goes and does family law for a year, sits with a chaplain in a car with a chaplain for a year. Then you put him back in the street, right? Now he's back in the street. Maybe he dealt with some PTSD issues. Maybe he dealt with some stuff he said. Maybe he had some conversations he should have had. Now we're in a better spot for everybody. Or you can go instead to quality of life. Quality of life is much more of a bigger deal when it comes to, urban communities than suburban communities. That's ticketing and noise pollution and stuff like that. So when it comes to that, you're going to have the cop, he's giving out tickets and such. Maybe he sits in quality of life for a year and then goes back into active policing. That may be even an easier way of doing it. The civilian component for that is nonprofits that will help to figure out the admin for each piece. And the last piece is S, which is social work. That's addiction, homeless, stuff like that. Again, maybe you put a cop there for a year or two. If they like it and they prefer that to active policing, maybe the cop stays there. I'm sure some cops would love to stay there. Maybe some cops don't want to be running around the streets anymore. It's fine. Whatever's going to work for the individual police force and the cops to keep them active and doing what's best for the community. All good. And in that case, the civilian component is actually social workers and students who are studying social work in local colleges. And that becomes your civilian component there. Now, again, you are clearly, armed differently, and you have a civilian component that is social workers in your vehicle. Facts is how you're able to break the police force up and train them better, depending upon where you are. Usually it's going to be urban. And the other one is quick. That's at a larger level, how you can make cops better, keeping the good cops happy and only punishing the bad cops.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. And I would add to that, too, especially for the SWAT teams, appearance matters, too. And
yes.
I see these SWAT teams every now and then. They're dressed up almost like the German SS from the Second World War. With the combat helmets and just all black or whatever. And it's like, what if instead we had them dressed in a similar fashion to like the French army in 1939, 1940, or something like that, whereby the appearance is much more suited for that type of act of policing or whatnot, like if they need to make a raid.
Or maybe you could even go, it depends on what you're doing, right? If you're doing the more social work, maybe they're literally in a polo shirt and nightstick.
Right. I mean,
right? If it's social work.
Right. And I'm just thinking too, because for the SWAT teams especially, they don't need to be dressed like the Gestapo or the SS from the Second World War. And that's literally what they look like. I mean, the helmet.
No, I'm getting you, but my other point is I also don't want them to feel like they have no chance of. I also don't want them to feel like we're trying to stop them either. I mean, sometimes there's some active police they have to deal with.
Right, but I mean, I think the appearance of the uniform matters just as much as the protection that we give them. Now,
sure, but I would allow the local communities to make that decision, not me.
Right, and I think the local communities should have a play in it. But
absolutely. It's their police force.
Right.
People should be policed the way they want to be policed.
Right.
Yep.
And so we're just about almost out of time. We might be a little over. And I wanted to touch base on campaign finance reform for the state, but we could probably do that in another interview if that's all right with you.
Sounds good to me, my friend. I was happy that you had me. Thank you for having me.
And is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
If anybody wants more information, feel free to head over to LarrySharpe.com. That's where all my policies are. You can see what I'm doing. You can see where I am, all those things.
All right. Well, it was a pleasure having you on, Larry. I'm hoping that this audio works.
I hope so, too. Thank you, my friend.
You're welcome.